And without further ado, I want to introduce Sheila Ryan. Sheila is VP of People at Glue Mobile. So please join me in welcoming Sheila and the rest of our panelists.
Thank you. I think I'm on. Yes, I can hear myself, so I'm on. Thank you all. I really appreciate everyone coming out, especially when there's puppy bowls and every other thing to enjoy. But as Darren was saying, this is quite a topic of conversation going on right now. And so I'm really excited to have our panel here. When we talk about performance reviews of the future, we're talking like internet future, maybe the next 2 or 3 years. We're not talking 10 or 20 years because of the speed of growth that we experience. So before we get started, a few housekeeping items. We're going to do Q&A at the end. And then we also want to make sure that you understand that you're being filmed. So stand up, say hello when you do ask your questions. So without further ado, I'd like to have our panelists come on up and take a chair. Round of applause for the brave souls. I'm going to have each one of them introduce themselves. We'll go in order from the far end. And if you could share a little bit about your background as well as the company that you work for, size, etc., so that people can identify with where they fit sort of in your grand scheme. Yeah. So Lisa?
You bet. Am I on? All right. So my name is Lisa Haugh. I am the VP of People and General Counsel here at Udemy. 1 second. Am I too far away? So Udemy has about 213 employees. A new one starting next Monday, or a new recruiter, who's also in the audience today, which is fantastic. I've been with the company for about a year. Obviously, Udemy is an online learning marketplace, and we also have that's made up of the consumer-facing Udemy.com that you can learn anything on, and then also the Udemy for Business side of the business as well.
My name is Scott Gordon, and I lead employee relations and employee experience at GE Digital. So GE Digital is a startup within General Electric, and where we really fit into that portfolio. Much like Alphabet and Google, GE is actually made up of it's a portfolio of different businesses that are all similar. What's similar across... Okay. All right, so we are a portfolio of businesses under the General Electric company. What's similar across all those businesses, they design, manufacture, sell, and service industrial equipment. That industrial equipment is just loaded down with sensors and can produce up to 1 terabyte of data every single day. So that's the big iron, where the big iron meets the big data. We actually at GE Digital pull that data out. It's in the cloud. We use open source software by Pivotal called Cloud Foundry. Then we built our own platform on top of that, and we're really calling that the industrial internet, or the operating system for the industrial internet, which is really all connected devices and industrial equipment. From there, either we can build an app for you, or you can build an app yourself, so software as a service or platform as a service. And this is really GE's new kind of growth platform that we're trying to use, where in order for us to grow, we're going out and building our own startups. So GE Digital, 3 years ago, 0 people, 0 revenue. Today, after 3 years, 1,300 people in San Ramon and $5 billion in revenue, and soon growing out globally. So I've been there for about 2.5 years, and so I've seen the growth from about number 400 to what is now about 1,300.
I'm Desiree Therianos. I'm head of people operations for Elation. We have a bit of an interesting story because Elation's a newly formed corporate entity, and Crunchyroll Inc. is actually the founding company. We had a new investor more recently, and so now we've changed trajectory. Anime is our specialty on the Crunchyroll side, but we've acquired other niche-specific content, and really we're just a video streaming content platform that's very niche-specific. So we have Crunchyroll on one side, which is anime, and then we have Creative Bug, which is arts and crafts, and we're hoping to expand this platform. And so that's really the differentiator for us in the industry. Crunchyroll was around for, this is actually in June, will be 10 years, so very exciting, but that's given us the ability to give way to Elation and really this mass growth. So in 2014, we tripled headcount. And this year, we're ready to scale again up to 150, so that's very exciting. Currently, we have 175. We have 10 new people starting Monday. So very exciting to see this growth and to be a part of it. Pretty much since the start, I knew the founding team since even before the first company that we worked at, and then they originated and made Crunchyroll it was a passion project out of their living room, and so it was nice to see the different stages and then actually see the growth even to today. So I'm happy to have grown with the company. I've been there about 8 years, and so again, very excited. This is actually an interesting topic for me. It's not my favorite, but I have a lot to say about it, and I've seen again that transition from having no structure to structure. So happy to talk about that. So thank you for having me.
Hi, I'm Stacy Shamberger, and I'm with the Skyline Group, and we're the leading provider of scalable leadership solutions. We've been around for about 30 years, but just in the past couple of years, we have developed an online solution that integrates online learning experience with a live executive coach done virtually. It's a global experience. And we've got about 200 employees at this time, coaches and consultants. I've been with the group for about 5 years, and prior to that I had a background working with ADP and IBM and some of the larger companies. So an interesting transition for me. We're in a high growth situation and really excited to be able to bring the solution that we have, Coaching for Excellence, to organizations for developing leaders.
Thank you. So as you can see, we have a wide variety of experience and companies represented here. So I'm going to dive right into our questions. So Lisa, I'm going to start with you. How do you administer performance reviews currently, and what kind of future changes do you have planned?
Yeah, so Darren kind of highlighted some of the changes that we've done recently in Udemy. So we actually, when I came in and took over on the people side last summer, one of the first things that people were asking about is some of the leaders were coming out and said, we really want to have performance reviews. We did performance reviews in January, but we really want to have them now. And I just looked at them like, you gotta be crazy, right? Like you really, you want us to do this? Yeah, I want to write down like my goals and I want to be evaluated. And so I thought, there's gotta be something behind that because people don't typically ask for that. And so I started having a conversation with some of the leaders, and what we were finding out is people did not want the performance review, the traditional, and they had the ranking system and fill out how you've been doing against your goals. What they wanted was, they were just aching for information from the managers. They weren't having those conversations. And so had a lot of discussions with managers, and then of course there was the wave of all the articles, whether it was Harvard Business Review, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, a lot of companies were doing it, and Berson's article as well. And so I just got a bee in my bonnet and started reading like crazy and learning everything, looking at all the studies, and talking with people in the company and outside the company, and really saying, I think let's try something different. And so what I came into an executive staff meeting, I think, and I just said, hey, we're going to flip this whole thing upside down. We're going to call it, we're going to make it a year-long thing instead of a one-time only. We're going to brand it the Udemy conversation. And that's because it's not just a manager talking down, that you as an employee own 50% of the conversation of the growth of your career. And then it would be really a spectrum. So performance reviews, as well as goal setting, as well as employee engagement, peer-to-peer recognition, kind of all feeding into that really strong, most important relationship between a manager and their direct report, so that they know and are always in touch and are getting that real-time feedback to talk both about the performance, what the strengths that they can bring to the project that they're working on, and really grow both the individual's development, but also the value to the company as well. So we just recently launched it last month. So far, so good. We'll see. We're trying to get people to use a new platform. We use the Reflective platform. Worked really closely with them. It's a small, young company, but worked really closely with us in terms of how we wanted to structure it. And we'll see how it goes.
Right. Scott, did you want to add?
Yeah, so I think with GE, I think a lot of people know GE for performance management. I think we've also got a rich history of innovation in HR space, right? We were one of the first companies to have a VP of HR actually reporting into the CEO. And that seat at the table allowed us to drive that innovation. I would say, I'd start off by saying we've also moved to a contemporary performance management model similar to yours. I'll talk a little bit at the end, but I'll talk about the history of GE and performance management. I think most people think of GE and performance management of like a decade ago. We had what most people kind of call the rack 'em, stack 'em, and whack 'em model, where the top 10% get promoted, top bottom percent are required to move on. That may have made sense back then, right? When you look back then and it's the Pepsi and the Cokes. It's always kind of two big companies are competing, high competition, relatively commoditized labor. That may have made sense. Move forward a few years later, and GE moves to a new model. As we grow globally, we need to make sure we're really scaling out our culture. So we had a traditional 9-blocker, right? So half of your performance review was based on performance, half of your performance review was based on kind of the behaviors that you leverage to drive performance. I think it made sense back then, right? Growing globally, scaling out the culture. Fast forward today, as of 2015, we rolled out what we call PD at GE, so performance development at GE. It's the same methodology. It's all about a continuous conversation. It's about real-time feedback. And what we've used is we've developed our own application to actually support that methodology and to complement. And I explain it like a news feed. So it's like your Facebook news feed. You and your manager can have a private conversation that just the two of you see, continuously use it. It's an app on the phone as well. Your peers can also provide you what we call insights to give you consider doing differently or continue doing. So that's visible by just you and your peers. So you're getting a very holistic view of your performance, and it's real time. And I think to complement the business market that we're actually seeing and really what our business requires, that idea of this very strict and rigorous ceremony that shuts down HR in the business for a month, that just can't fly anymore. Right? There's companies out there that could eat our lunch tomorrow by jumping into a startup in their garage. We've got to make sure our business processes reflect that, and that includes the HR processes. Mm-hmm. So that's why we changed. I think it makes sense for today. I would also say that this is iteration 1. We are fully transparent with our employees. This is going to change every year as we grow and evolve.
So that reflects really what we're hearing in the media, what we're all feeling, and obviously we have an old staunch company that in the thought as well as the new young company. So do you think that is just because of the millennials, or is there something else driving this? And I know there's some opinions right here next to me. So Desiree, did you want to?
Well, we're seeing those trends for sure, and I think it's definitely making an impact. For us, we're using reflective as well. And what we like about it, we kind of got in early, and it's a very new platform. They're like very eager and willing to incorporate customized options. Yeah. We're doing the OKRs as well as a mid-year and a year-end performance review cycle. It is on a scale. It is attributed to performance as well, and 50% on company performance of OKRs, and then 50% on individual performance. I would say right now it's like a mixing pot. It's kind of a mess. We're trying to figure it out, and we're very much hearing that need from the millennial. That's why I say that it has something to do with it. People want gratification. They want the connection. They want it incorporated with your culture and your values. And because of how fast we've scaled, we've had the challenge of trying to kind of catch up with the process, right? And also, in order to retain, we have to listen to the feedback and have a way to really reassure employees that we are gauging their performance and contribution effectively. We also have many new managers, and so really educating and training our managers properly to be able to give this feedback has been a really big challenge for us. And I think it comes back to that connection, and this is where the millennials come into play. That connection is very huge. There has to be a negotiation between the company and the employee, and you're not seeing very many people stay in these roles for more than 2-3 years. Mm-hmm. And if you as a company are rushing to put these systems into place, but you're not able to fulfill and have that that proper development for that employee, they're not going to stick around to watch you figure it out. And that's what we're seeing. So I do feel like that is a very big, very big concept that we are really quickly trying to come up to speed with. I mean, otherwise we'll see people leave, and that's what we've seen. And add the added complexity of a newly formed corporate entity. That's a fun one too. So we have a lot going on. We're figuring it out. We love that Reflective allows us to pretty much customize it as we see fit, and we love that. We're also incorporating OKRs into Reflective, and we're able to grade them as well in that way. So on an individual basis, people can add their own scale for that. But it's very complex for us right now. We haven't figured it out, I have to be honest. But I think that we can relate to a lot of the smaller startups in that way, because overnight you have that need for structure, and you have to find the balance. There has to be a right balance of structure as well as connection, and you have to tie it into your culture. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful in retaining. So we have challenges. But we're working through it. I have part of my HR team, and they're like, yeah, this month has been really shitty. So sorry.
So Stacy, you had some thoughts on the millennial, I believe.
Yeah, I did. I mean, when we look at this process of ranking, right, this has actually been going on since the early to mid-'70s. And this was when this was really introduced. And I think after 40-some years, people have realized this stack ranking, the way we have conversations on an annual basis, is not working. And I look at, there's recently some information that came out from Adobe where they realized that they spend 80,000 hours a year on just getting that performance review taken care of based on their 2,000 managers doing this. So when you look at the laborious process of doing the performance review, then you look at the fact that it really has not evolved in the past 40 years. It's stayed the same. And then we bring in neuroscience. And now there's data out there that shows that when people prepare to either give a performance review or receive the performance review, the fight or flight kicks in. And how that translates is the employee and the manager become either flight or fright, aggressive, or they become somewhat anxious. And so when you combine all of this with a process that hasn't changed in decades, it is not working, it creates a very laborious process within an organization, and people become anxious and almost aggressive toward the process, then you start having people unplug. So I think that's really what it's about. I love the fact that the millennials are outspoken and they speak their mind, but really this is something that I think that's been deteriorating for years. And we've just reached a point where we realize it's not effective, it's not efficient. And I saw a statistic recently, CEB, Conference Executive Board, did some surveys and came back and said 90% of the HR executives said we spend about 1/4 of our year preparing, debriefing all around this process. Just think what each of you could do with that. If you could take that down, make it more meaningful, do an ongoing process, that could be directed toward talent development, acquisition. Just where else could you spend your time when you're spending your time on something that no one appreciates and no one's getting anything out of it? Only time I see people wanting it is they think they're going to get their raise or their promotion. And if they don't get either one, that's when, okay, where do I go next? And then it's that mindset, right, that I'm being judged, I'm being placed at this level, and I can't go beyond that. So it's just an inefficient system, and I just think the time has come to shut it down and start to collaborate and look at something that's ongoing and meaningful for the employee and the organization.
Yeah, we've removed performance ratings at GE as well, so there's no more rating that you can achieve.
Yeah.
And we found that across the board, employees are walking into those really kind of end of the year discussion. We wouldn't call it a performance review, but it's an end of the year discussion that we actually have an algorithm that brings together all those insights, that news feed throughout the year. And you walk into that discussion and the anxiety's gone, right?
Yeah.
The manager's not spending the entire hour justifying, 1 or 2 words.
Yeah, we really value our one-on-ones. We take them very seriously. We do execute them. It's not just something that gets rescheduled every 2 weeks or once a week or, I don't have to worry about it. It's on my calendar. My manager's not going to meet with me. No, we take it very seriously. That's that opportunity to have that interface with the employee, to talk about how are things going, what's happening with you, and really have that ongoing discussion. That's how you develop, that's how you improve performance, and that's really how you get that insight into what the employees are looking for from the organization, for themselves, for their own development. It's really having those ongoing conversations.
And quite frankly, that's what actually drives the the performance of the organization. We kind of forget about that because we're all, like you said, trying to justify a couple of words or what we're going to do in the merit. So, so with that, we've said here we are now. Where do you think the future of performance reviews lies? And what about goal setting? How does that fit in? Who wants to take that?
Yeah, I guess. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
No, let's do the next. I'll get up after you. So.
Sure. So look, I think the future of performance management, I don't think there's going to be any one company in the next 2 years that really figures this out. We're all moving towards this new contemporary model. I don't think there's going to be any one HRIS system that comes in and solves all the problems. I think every company can take a little bit of risk, contribute to this ecosystem of people analytics, and we're going to be able to find everything from CRMs on candidates, training for your employees, text analytics on these insights and these reviews that you guys are using through this contemporary model, these one-on-ones. You're going to find, I guess, like the sympathy of what the team's feeling through emails, right? All this type of stuff is going to get into one repository. We'll be able to make decisions better, and I think this idea of performance management is going to be a very tiny slice of the pie towards a more holistic approach. I think we can't talk enough about this ceremony and all this effort that goes into it. And from an employee perspective, I don't think they're thrilled with it, and I think we've all heard from it. Why would you spend so much time when only a few people get a few extra percent of their raise? So someone gets 3 and someone gets 5, and you did all that for just a few folks. If you're not doing anything with that data, it's really pretty meaningless. It's just a waste of time. So you go in holistically, and we take insights out that we can make more decisions every single day on. I think that's going to be the future. There's enough of these companies popping up in the Bay that are helping contribute to this ecosystem, and I think someone collectively is going to be able to do it over time. But for now, each company is going to jump in and contribute.
Yeah, I see a transformation happening, and the transformation is at the manager level. So moving the manager from the appraiser to the coach, moving the manager from the judge and the jury to someone that works as a mentor and someone that can actually provide guidance and development for the talent. Lots of small pieces of data collected over the year annually at pulse or burst surveys, right? Capturing that data real time, getting that feedback, and then incorporating that data into changes immediately. We've watched data collection over the years, and performance reviews is a great example. What happens with the data? How long does it sit there and it's stagnant? What changes are made once the data is collected? So you get these small pulses of data and actually start to make changes within the organization based on real-time feedback from the employees around what's going on with their performance, with their development. But I really see that major shift of the manager having to shift from light to dark.
Well, and you talked
Darth
about
Vader.
you talked about those scores sitting stale. I've experienced where the goals sit stale until we pull them out again in December and say, "Oh, did you meet them?" So how do you see that connection as we continue to move forward?
We're in this position. We have, again, because we have the corporate scorecard, but then we are trying reflective, which is the ongoing feedback tied into our mid-year and year-end. So there's many components, and having our managers well equipped to manage all this information, I think, is absolutely where we need to start, and that's where we've been starting as an HR perspective for our team. But it's challenging, right? Because when you scale, this is something that the executive team doesn't want to hear, that you want to grow your HR team and double it because you need to manage analytics and you need to manage all these different cycles. And as Stacy mentioned, it's a very cumbersome process. You end up spending 3 months analyzing data to come out in the end with still not enough to justify the growth, right? So there's a lot of tension there. Goals fall to the side instead of being in the forefront, and that's really where we're trying to see a trend change. And I absolutely agree that that's where we're headed. It's going to take one or two more, maybe more than 2 years, to be honest with you. Even Reflective has its challenges. I see Rajiv over there. Hi. But you will see more of these emerging companies come through because there is such a need, and that's what the market's telling us. The candidates are telling us this, employees are telling us, and managers. I mean, they're really crying out for a solution that's going to solve all these problems. And there isn't one that works. So we use many different platforms. Reflective is our main. platform, but we're using Google Docs, because it's collaborative, and that's one aspect of capturing goals and having a lot of different people come together and shape it. So I think scaling organizations have to do what works, and it's not always going to be integrated. And that again is another challenge of HR, right? Especially as you scale. We'd love for it to be, so hopefully that comes soon.
So I was touching base on going back to talking about our conversation, and what we're doing with goals is we are saying this year, and again, this is iteration 1, right? V1 or 1.0. But what we've decided is saying we're going to do, it was just annual goals that just none of them applied, and we even did a mid-year check-in, and they were in August, and Marie is laughing because we actually pulled out that piece of paper, and not one of the goals that we had really thoughtfully gotten through did we achieve, because we were working on other things, like the new performance, the Udemy conversation, and the structuring and the research that we did to take that. But so I think the goal setting is one of those things that goes along with the conversation, is saying, whether you do it on a quarterly basis or a biannual basis. So again, the platform is nice because you put the goal in there, and you and your manager are, when you sit down for your one-on-one, you're checking in. You have the goal right there. And for us, it's either hit it, missed it, met it, or blew it out. And you're having these meetings. You can have them on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. And then the other piece that we're building in is, my goal is changing. Let's have that discussion. And that one, you're already in, only 3 weeks in the quarter, and you're like, wait, that's just not the priority of the company anymore. We're all moving so fast. You've got to have that system and the flexibility and the structure to allow the manager to do it, and also the individual. You may have someone sitting here that says, oh my gosh, I'm really excited about data analytics. Can I add that to my goal? And what you certainly don't want to have as a manager say, wow, it's February 15th, I don't think so, maybe think about it and come back to me in the June cycle. You want to be able to be fluid. And just going back to the last question you asked about the future, I think all of this data that we're gathering will allow a company, if we're building it out the right way, to almost build internal resumes, if you will, and all the feedback that you're getting, and what are your strengths and what are your abilities, and how can that be utilized not only in the group that you're in, but it's a very agile workforce, right? You can move. This happens all the time at Udemy. I think it's one of our best, most exciting aspects of having a job here is you have managers that are having these discussions with their employees, and they say this is their skill set. This is what this person is really good at. Well, if they're really good, analytical ability, they want to work with customers, well then I understand what their skill set is. This has been their performance over the past 3, 6, 9 months. Let's put them in a different role that's even going to challenge them more. And by gathering all of this data, we just have to figure out to have a tool that makes that available to the whole organization. So then you have, so it's, it's just, again, I think you're right. It's a lot of information. It's goals, it's performance, it's feeding into this potential amount of data that can be helpful to really drive the business.
Yeah. No, we think about most companies out here in the Bay, operating loss, 70% of it is likely people.
Yeah.
Right, your payroll expenses easily 60-70% of operating loss, but yet the number of analytics is mind-numbingly small. So as a manager, not knowing real-time data on capabilities and performance to be able to make decisions, it's almost absurd to think that we don't have that yet. But again, I think we're going to get there.
I think so too.
So you guys have segued into the next question, which is, what do you do with the data? It sounds like a lot of us are saying we haven't done much with it yet, but what sorts of programs or ideas do you have at the forefront of how you want to use that data and where you think we're going to be able to go with all of this data?
Well, I think one thing we have to look at is how to create knowledge management systems within an organization that utilize the data, stack the data, make it available so that it makes sense, right? So when you talk about the internal resume, that's the knowledge management system, right? Understanding where the skills are, where the competencies are within the organization, and who owns those, so that you can start to look at the organization holistically, and then also pare it down individually where the strengths are. I also think it's important to flip back to goal setting for just a moment. One thing that I'm not hearing is personal goal. one thing I've learned through the years working with folks, being in leadership, asking those personal goals goes a long way to building that relationship. And then you can tie the business goals to the personal goals. And now they start to make sense of those individuals. So not just looking at it from a business perspective, but how is it going to impact them from a personal perspective and really make that holistic. But the data piece around creating the knowledge management system is so important so that you know where's the IP, where's the internal IP within my organization and how can I get it? I have this project that I'm going to be working on, how do I get to it? And there's knowledge management systems out there that are available that have the framework already set up for you. And I see somebody nodding their head back there. I don't know if that's what you do, but.
Any other thoughts there? Okay. So, what are some of the trends that you've seen emerging, and how can this audience prepare for some of those new practices? Scott?
Yeah, I think so. New trends. I think every company is moving down this path of the contemporary performance management. I think the new trends is figuring out again where people are going to spend their time with the data analytics and how are they going to integrate that in. I can tell you one thing that GE is doing, and as we talk about what we do with some of the data, we are looking at specific capabilities and trying to tie it back to a CRM for candidates. So you can figure out, look, we're missing this type of capability, whether it be Python or, you name the what you choose your company needs to be successful. And that ties back into that external market, and we can go out and take a look of where we've actually made contact. So that helps us. Again, we're going to get there and evolve it over time, though.
So, do you, or how do you, we're not sure yet, how do you use your performance reviews in recruiting talent? There's recruiting and retention, and as you were saying, Stacy, these reviews can cause quite a bit of anxiety, so it could be a tool. And do you use that? In any of you use that?
I do, and I have in the past. And how you utilize that is you start to look at who's your employee profile, right? And you can start to build an employee profile based on the performance review data that you have. And so based on that employee data that you have, you can then start to create a hiring process around these are the metrics that we see of the employees that we want to retain, that we want to keep within the organization, and we want to hire. And to really get creative and move outside the what degree do they have and but really looking into, as I said earlier, their personal IP, their strengths and weaknesses, what they do well, and using that to create a profile for leadership and managers when you're recruiting and bringing folks in. So that's one thing that I've looked at in the past on how to create a profile based on the data I have internally around the folks that are really performing or doing things right that I want to make sure that I replicate.
Yeah, I think when I interpret this question, I almost look at, are you using this as a competitive advantage or as a part of your value proposition? You guys everyone remember this term from like 10 years ago that there's a war on talent? Remember that? Well, the story is the war is over. Talent won. And talent is not going to put up with a performance review that is, again, antiquated and creates a lot of anxiety. They're looking for continuous feedback. And it's something that we can offer within GE is to show that we are contemporary. We are looking to develop our employees. You see a lot of employees, every 2 years switch jobs. We try to push against that. And we'd like to be able to retain our talent and continue to develop them. So we use this as a big part of our value proposition to talent, that we invest in them and we look to grow them.
All right, we've already covered this question. Let's go to another one. All right, so what about recognition? So now you've had these conversations. How do you recognize those that are those profiles that you want to keep, that you really want to push in your organization? What kinds of things have you guys done?
We love the ongoing recognition piece. And again, like reflective is just the tool, but your culture has to sustain this as well and really support what you're trying to do in your organization. So we, in our all hands every Friday, we make it a point for each different department to present and recognize and highlight different accomplishments. And then we also incentivize that, by giving different measures for managers to take advantage of.
So they get to plan weekly trips for their teams, or if we hit different goals, they get incentives such as gift cards, etc. We're trying like little different techniques to get people energized around this, because our cultural and it's part of our newer vision for Elation. It's been really hard to get everybody united around that, especially since we have a demographic of Crunchyroll and the corporate entity Elation. So I'll talk a little bit more about that because I think I'm confusing people when I talk about that. People ops and legal and finance for Elation are considered shared services. And because we have different niche demographics, when you come into our office, you'll see Crunchyroll, you'll see Creative Bug, you'll see shared services as Elation, and it's really a commingling of all these different cultures. So when we tie back to recognition, we have to make sure that we're respecting each one of these different avenues and giving them the attention and recognition that's deserved. And so it's been very challenging to manage that, but very exciting to see. So, we just have open forums where we continue to support that. So pretty much that's our approach. And I think it's working. We're gauging that now.
That's it's a timely question, because that's exactly what we're kind of thinking about and noodling right now with this performance review cycle and look back or recap for 2015. A couple of things in terms of recognition. One, when you're looking at your employee population, looking at high potential, when we want to say recognition is the additional programs and the levers that we want to give to managers for those high performing employees. So you're having these conversations, you have these people that you've highlighted as our overachievers that are really chomping at the bit for more, and so we want to have those programs built in. So whether it's a leadership program or a coaching program or just other opportunities, we have a thing called tribes here at Udemy where it's a cross-function, it's a business problem that we're trying to solve, and so we task a leader that might be a director or a manager in the organization to kind of lead the business problem, and then have other people across the organization join that tribe and solve that business problem. And that actually, it's funny, for us, we just think, oh my gosh, this is great because we're getting great minds to solve a problem. But actually, when you talk to the employees, they think, they consider it a recognition of their skill set that they're bringing to bear. This is not necessarily, it is the product person is bringing a product lens to the tribe, but it's also valuing all of their abilities and experience that they're bringing. So we do that on one hand, that's what we use some of the information for. But on the other hand, I agree with you, we're driving values, and we just did an offsite last week, and we did a value award ceremony. And this is something we literally threw together. You can't steal our Udemy experience coordinator, who was amazing host, but we did the Demis. So we effectively did an Emmy Awards style show with awards and everything, and we had people nominate employees across the organization that were real role models with respect to the values, and then we have a culture club. We had them vote on it, and we gave them ideas or gave them the awards, and it was such a moving moment. And what was the most beautiful was every winner that came up was utterly shocked and thought it was another person that won the award. So it's one of those showcases about the values. It's a non-monetary recognition, and but it's happening because people are living the values every day. So it's recognition can come in different forms.
It has to be driven by your demographic, otherwise they won't adopt, right? And so we found that as well.
Yeah.
And we have a very, it's an open forum in all hands. I love that. We have crazy questions because we allow for it, and it's great the CEO actually entertains it. And we take that feedback, and then we also have other platforms to gauge, that feedback throughout the year. But I think that's what's been success for us. Empowering the employee, giving them a voice is invaluable. But again, it's a lot of data all the time. And you'll get a ton of feedback, and you have to find the drivers and really see, depending on which area of the organization you have a need for. We, like every other company, small startups are looking for engineers. So how do you appeal to that demographic, right? So it's a challenge.
I'm going to throw a curveball. not on the slate that you guys prepared for, so watch out, everybody. So you talked about trying to recognize some of the high performers. Aside from your performance system, is there any other way that you work to identify the high performers and do something to keep that talent going and recognize them? That's not just, we got it through the performance review.
Yeah, I have to say we're 100% virtual. So we have no bricks and mortar. So our employees are all over the world. And so we are always trying to find creative ways to keep them engaged and reward them. And one of the things that we look at is, once again, we get on that personal level. What's important to you? And we even we don't just give them things, but we really think about what's personal to them. What do they want to do? How do they want to spend their time? And actually create ideas and ways for them to do that. Even sometimes it's even something as simple as a gift certificate or something, but nothing like an Amazon gift card. No offense, Amazon, but something that's very specific to the individual that they really enjoyed as something about them. So when you're working virtually, I'm hearing all these wonderful ideas, and you can't get people together in a room. Yeah. And you can't have the rah-rah, sessions. So you have to learn to work with the technology. You have to learn to do things, and with teleconferencing, you have to learn how to have those close conversations and really let them feel that you're being seen, you're being recognized, and we really value what you're bringing to the organization. And doing that when somebody's 3,000 or 4,000 miles away can be challenging. You see them maybe once a year. So that's why we try to get very personal with things, because we don't have that opportunity to walk down the hall and sit down and have that conversation with someone.
Yeah, I think the future of where this goes is exciting. As we think about where performance management meets recognition, right? There's all the kind of debate of, does pay for performance go away? I think one thing that comes first is this analytic on what do people actually want. And as we talk about talent kind of being a big voice in voting with their feet, going from company to company, what that value proposition looks like, I think we're going to start to see companies know exactly what they want. Does someone want to be leveraged with bonus more? Do they want stock? Do they want training? And literally, if we know that, we can make those decisions better, and it's a more meaningful reward for the individual, as you said, personalized. Mm-hmm. That's going to be something that I think comes next as we really start to build this platform. Iteration 1, Iteration 2, it's all going to connect together.
Mm-hmm. And we did talk about, so like I say, the level 3 of ours is peer-to-peer recognition, and that's what I think is sometimes can really be the secret sauce. It sounds like you guys are doing it just on a weekly basis, but I used to work for a company called Achievers that had this platform, and we're implementing it using Reflective pretty shortly. And there's such a power in peer-to-peer recognition, whether it's monetary or not, and the news feeds that comes from it. Because I know for me, if I'm out of the office for a day or on a business trip, I would come back at my last company, and I would just scroll through the newsfeed, and it was, once it's getting up and running, you get a glimpse into everything that's happening across the entire organization. Because someone will say, you'll get a salesperson that's talking to someone in marketing that's like, oh my God, thank you for burning the midnight oil. You really helped me create the most amazing presentation. I think we're going to get that deal. And then the very next one is, these 2 engineers that couldn't quite figure out the bug, but Sam just nailed it this morning and hit the hammer enough times and really got it. And then you flip over to another person that is thanking the receptionist for setting up a happy hour. But you get it's those little tiny things and those little tiny thank yous stack up to make you feel really a part of the team of the company that you're in.
That peer-to-peer is infectious. It actually really is. It took us a while to adopt to it. Everyone at first thought, hey, what is this reflective recognition wall? And it looked like a social media platform, and they thought it was very awkward for this growing entity. But after a while, it actually was a means of connection. Mm-hmm. So you saw these comments, and you were able to connect with someone and say, hey, I saw that you did this, and and thank you for doing that for this other person. Mm-hmm. And so it was really funny to see that kind of carry out through the organization and actually sustain. So we launched Reflective, I think it's been maybe 7 or 8 months, and really it took us 3 to 4 months to really kind of get into using the system and get to a point where we saw that peer-to-peer really make a difference. Yeah. We're not incentivizing with any monetary actions, but we definitely see it, and it's actually even coming into play in our all hands. People will comment through the questions about the feed, which is really nice. We also wanted to showcase the recognition wall weekly. We tried it once and people were like, what is this? But it was just literally a summary of the recognition for the week, and that's another way to really support and adopt. We only did it once. We got good response, but now we're trying to figure out how to really incorporate it in a way that's going to be more meaningful because we have seen such a positive reaction. So, yeah.
All right, so on a final note, before we let all of you to get in here, what advice can you give the audience to set forth to either create or revamp their current performance management process and strategy? Here's your advice, everyone.
Transparency. I would say, for us, we're just honest about it and we're telling everyone, hey, we're trying something new. And if you can't chime in and help us get it right, then we're going to have some problems. But that's really a call to community, and again, another way to connect. And just, being very open about it has helped for us. And yeah.
I'd say a couple things. It's first a talent methodology followed by a tool. And I think a lot of times folks go out and try to implement a tool without actually changing the culture and the methodology behind it.
Absolutely.
That's by far probably my biggest piece of advice. I'd say also performance management tends to be a very institutionalized. You're dealing with people's pay and how they get potentially rated if you still have those systems. It's not as held tightly as you think, and it's okay to iterate. And it's okay to be honest with your employees that you're trying something new. It's for the best for the customers, for them, for the organization, and you can start to drive that change. So again, transparency helps. The third thing I say is try, if we can all in this room, try to add something back to that ecosystem, pick up some kind of data analytics tool for your people. That's going to help us all collectively. If you can do it at your company, or we have HR roles open at GE Digital, if you want to come join us, we're doing cool stuff, and we'd be happy to have you.
Yeah, I think one thing you can do is just what you're doing here, right? Coming together with your peers, having conversations, learning from each other, getting ideas. Oftentimes what happens, we start to act in a vacuum. And you might even be acting in a team vacuum. And you think everything we're doing is great, we love, love ourselves, then you don't want to look outside because maybe what we're doing doesn't look as pretty to everybody else, So get out into these types of forums, learn from each other, have conversations. Really and constantly see what's on the horizon. GE's out there doing something new, check them out. And ask your employees. Ask your employees and do something with the data. Don't make it a big, drawn out survey where they're ready to, a couple simple questions. What do you want? What are you looking for? Something where they can, and then do something with it. Do something with the data. Make the change. But just being here today is probably one of the greatest things you can do is get those ideas from your peers and learn from each other.
Yeah, I mean, it's echoing kind of what everybody said. I mean, start with who are you, right? Think of who you are as an organization. Look at your values, and then think of what's the best of that, of what all the employees bring, and then figure out what your framework is and what's going to work and actually be able to be implemented. And because if it's against your culture, the body's just going to reject that organ. So take the best of the ideas from different things that you hear, and then, like you said, just iterate, throw something out there, see if it sticks. Try and get buy-in, but sometimes you don't need to get buy-in. You have a voice and a platform, and say, let's try this. We aren't doing anything bold here. What we're actually doing is nurturing natural human behavior, and we're moving away from that negative fight or flight response kind of behaviors that were put in the past for some unknown reason. And let's honoring the individuals that are coming to work with us and choosing to work with us, because I think we spend so much time and energy hiring and on the recruiting function, and then when they're here, it's our obligation to really grow these individuals and make sure that they are learning and getting as much from us as we are from them. And so if you have that as a philosophy, then everything else kind of will slowly fall into place. A lot of work, but it'll fall into place.
Well, we know that this is a very hot topic, and the value, to your point, Stacy, is really the interaction that you get here. and the interaction with the panel versus us sort of pontificating for hours and hours. So we want to open this up for questions, but before we do, let's just say thank you to everyone for their expertise. And I believe there's some people roaming around with microphones, so there's a lot of questions right there. And whoever gets the microphone first.
Hi. Okay. My name is Kim, and I'm the VP of People and Talent at Strava. And we are hiring as well in recruiting and HR, so look me up. My question for you, I actually have two. One is really quick. So GE performance ratings gone across the entire company or just within your startup? I have to know.
Great question. So there's about 8 different businesses under GE. We have the benefit of saying we're iterating on each within each business, or choosing to do things differently. Some of those are, probably $25 billion companies with 15,000 employees at least. So we're actually trying out different methodologies with different businesses. Most of the businesses, 0 ratings. There are a few that are left that are using ratings. We may choose next year. It was actually the right thing to do. But right now, within GE Digital, the business I'm with, we've chosen not to use ratings.
Great. Thank you. It's a revolutionary concept for me as an HR person to hear GE.
Yeah.
It's very
Look,
exciting.
I think a lot of people would be surprised what GE's doing out here. We've gone, we do the unlimited vacation. It looks like a startup. We behave like a startup. It's small, empowered teams. I think 85% of all the people the 1,300 people in that building are coming from all the companies out here, brand new to GE, and that's what they expect, and that's what they, in many ways, kind of asked for, and we were happy to be able to provide it.
Very cool. Okay, sorry, one more question, and I hope it might be on some of your minds as well. This is great. I think it's the right direction to move. The conversation is awesome. The place where I get hung up is around compensation. And so we have these great conversations. We're getting rid of review scores. How do you have conversations with your executive team, with your CFO, people who are more traditional in their mindset, about how you're going to make decisions around compensation if you've stripped away kind of the anchor that they understand? And then also, how do you have those conversations with your employees? So, this is the increase that you got, and here are the factors that go into that. How do you guys do that? If you have that answer, it would be awesome.
That's the $1 million question. It's so funny that you asked that, because of course that's the first question. We have one of my team, one of the executives, that actually looked at it. He's like, that was such a great presentation, Lisa. I love the research. I really am bought in. I just guess I'm old school. How do I still need to rank people, right? Or how do I need a tool? And then I had one person on staff just like, I can't do it. And it was like, you could see him numbering the role model is 5, and this person, and not, like he's probably data crunching for sure. I won't tell you who's that. But therein lies the problem. So what does that mean? So that is, maybe we're adding back some hours, because a lot of it is these calibration meetings. It's a lot more discussions about who are your real leaders, your up-and-coming leaders, where are your high potential, and it's a complex conversation. And I wish I had a better answer for you. We're actually going through that now. And Brandon's probably looking at me like my director of people is a real data guy, and so he's probably also one of those people that's secretly ranking people. But this is one of the things that we're struggling with. But right now, the way we're answering it is by having more layers of conversations and seeing how we do a better job of applauding your key talent, and giving the managers the tools to look at a range of whether it's compensation or raises, and have the dialogue about where they should fall there. Sorry, it's not a clean answer.
There isn't a clean answer,
I know,
unfortunately,
yeah.
and this is what we're talking about. We're going to evolve there, and there'll be some type of way to measure it, but it's not in place right now, and that's the challenge we have. There's so much insecurity around this area, and I think empowering the managers is really the start, right? And so we've had a lot of these discussions, and I'll be a little bit transparent too in the fact that from a corporate perspective, we didn't hit our goals this year. right? So how do you explain that to employees when you recently launch a bonus program, everybody's banking on getting that full bonus, and you have to tell them that we didn't actually hit it on the on the company perspective. On the individual side, that's a little different. So we had to work with our board to really get the buy-in, because again, we really had target goals, and you have to be able to pull those levers, and we ended up actually bonusing at 100% anyway, and that was just something we had to do. But we have moved to a model where we're trying to empower our managers more, and I think there's something to be said there, but the data hasn't caught up, right? And that's just where we're at. So I came here to learn, actually, so I'm happy to be on the panel, but everybody in the discussion has really offered a lot of new insight. So I'm wondering how we're going to take that and actually try to implement something new in our organization. And if someone actually finds the answer to this, they need to share it.
I'm going to pipe in real
Yeah,
quick and
please.
say what I did at a prior company introducing the no ratings was I made it very clear to managers and employees, the manager gets a bucket of money. They're going to distribute it based on their performance. You're having a conversation all year long. So you should know, you should not be surprised if you get more of the money or less of the money, because you should know where you stand. And if you don't know where you stand, you need to have that conversation with your manager, because they're not doing their job. And so they got it, and there was but that's subjective. And I said, and them giving you a number isn't? And they're like, oh, I guess you're right. So
That's been the long-term issue with any performance review, right? The subjectiveness of the manager. But if you are tracking goals and you are keeping those ongoing conversations and making sure that the manager knows how the employee is progressing, they have some data around how they should be compensated. But the subjectivity,
they know what they're going to give them. They just want the backup. They want to, and then they go, oh yeah, I do know. If I asked them right now, they know who their top people are. They just don't have all the data to back themselves up all the time. Okay. See, we can talk forever.
So we've talked about data, obviously a lot, about one-on-ones. We put a lot of emphasis on one-on-ones being kind of mini performance management conversations every time. It should be, how are you as a person? What challenges are you facing? Here's some feedback for you. Kind of what are the things you're doing really well? What are the things you can work on? And how do you get there? We actually do a lot of one-on-ones. Kind of the culture is just walking meetings. So actually shut your computer, put your phone away, and really just focus on the individual. So I know you guys have talked a little bit about reflective, but those are also such valuable times to get data on what are the trends that people are facing, the challenges people are facing, the areas for improvement across a group or an organization or whatever it may be. So how do you think about getting that data real time from those really rich conversations between a manager and a direct report that you can then do something about it with training or with, shifting something in the culture values or whatever it may be?
That's a good question. I'm a big fan of that, of walking around, and now that we have such a big floor space, we do a lot of the walking around. But I don't think if you have a platform, again, it's just the tool and it's not the methodology. And so I wouldn't force people, okay, sit down, pull out your, log into Reflective and see, go through each one of those. I think it's more about accountability and making sure that you stay on that cadence for both the employee and the manager. So you still have those, put your phone away, close your computer, have those conversations, but then come back, because recall isn't very good if you don't do it immediately, and then put the information still on the platform, and then it's available for you. It also allows us in our HR function to see what managers are being successful in this and not, and then seeing what kind of feedback we're getting from the employees. Because remember, Reflective, or at least the way we're using it, it's the employee is putting in their information as well as the manager for each of the one-on-ones or the check-ins. But I wouldn't take away that time, because I think that's so valuable, because building those direct relationships is what's key here.
You have to make sure you're also creating some standards around the language that's being inputted into the system. Because as some of you may know, we're moving to text reporting. We can actually report on text, right? It's going on right now. So if you keep a consistency in the reflections and the feedback from the manager, and even have an opportunity for the employee to perhaps add some data as well, but make sure that there's consistency in that language so you can use that data. It's not just dead text laying somewhere.
It's essential to have the employee
Yeah.
actually chime in.
Yes.
If not, you're going to run into many problems. So we did notice that initially, and they said, hey, wait a minute, what about my voice? And that, again, is part of that fulfilling relationship, right? And you empower not only the manager, but the employee at the same time in order for this structure to work, right?
Hi. How are you ensuring that the one-on-one conversations are really happening at a high quality? What are the kinds of processes you're putting in place, the expectations, even how you're measuring it, and even giving people the skills to give both positive and negative feedback?
So this is something we do at GE, but I've heard a good example. I think it's Salesforce that uses it. They basically have, what I've heard, it's like every 6 months they do almost like a career fair, and employees really vote with their feet and go to the managers they know are providing good feedback. So I think you get that data over time. I think we heard from a previous panel, there's a company out there that will do the reviews to make sure that employees are having one-on-ones, and they can actually see downstream results of, I think it's sick time and just performance in general of those managers that have more regular one-on-ones. So again, with good data, you can make great decisions, and there's companies out there that are doing this now.
Yeah, that one-on-one is so critical to creating that relationship. You talk about the sick time, performance. When an employee feels like I'm connected with my manager, that I have a relationship, that they start to take on a different persona themselves within the organization. So sometimes you can just step back and kind of see this team is behaving that way, that team is behaving this way, there's a disconnect there. And also seeking out those managers who are doing a good job with one-on-ones. Find out what they're doing, talk to their team, what's going on. Feedback, right? We need feedback from employees, from managers. We need that feedback. Don't do it in a vacuum.
We hold quarterly sessions just for the managers, and then we'll, select different topics based on what we hear from employees. We have an anonymous feedback platform, and it's actually, it's just a SurveyMonkey question that we send out, or people can, utilize any time. But we really track, the trends from that feedback. It is more a manual process, but it has guided these conversations. And then when we're able to get the managers together for these quarterly syncs, we have various topics such as the one-on-one, and that's one that we had more recently. And it's valuable because you have all the managers contributing and discussing, from their perspective, how it's worked for them, the highs and lows, and it's all centered around one specific topic. So for us, that's been very helpful. It is challenging because we have very aggressive goals. We are, limited on resources, and so people kind of feel like it's a drag some to pull away to do this. But when they leave, they actually take away some key concepts that have been very valuable. And so it's nice to hear that feedback and see that it's actually working, even though it is cumbersome on the process. But I think you have to make the time, and that goes back to empowering your managers, right? And this is one means to do it by supporting one another, right? I think creating that support system, especially for, we're not a very big company, but if we don't have that at 175 employees, then, there's something wrong as we continue to scale, and we'll see it because people will most likely leave. So we don't want that, so.
Hello? Okay, yes, it's working. So I have a question for Scott. If a company wants to implement the ongoing feedback mechanism, you can't simply just tell managers, just give feedback more often to your employees. So what steps would you recommend that a company should take to, establish this as a formal process? How do you ensure or measure that managers do give feedback on a regular basis and that they give it properly? I know that GE has a feedback app called PD at GE, so if you could tell us a little bit more about that or any other recommendations you have to ensure that the feedback process is effective.
Yeah. So look, I think actually you guys have the right formula too. It's got to be both ways. It's not just the manager. So we've taken probably a more viral approach where we were saying traditional GE outside of our startup would say, let's get all the training together, let's package it up in a bow, tie it together, deploy it, and now managers go do it. That's just not realistic. Again, if we stay agile and we want to see how this works, we said, look, employees, this is for you. This is for your benefit. This is how we develop you. This is how you get feedback. So in that meeting, 50-50, you can get your hands on the keyboard or your phone and provide what we call an insight. So after that one-on-one, do a recap and indicate what you guys talked about, consider doing differently, continue doing, what customer impact you've had this week. So the employee takes a big piece of the ownership there, and the manager and the employee can agree in that meeting, the last 5 minutes, what 180 characters are you going to throw in there. They'll create what they call that insight. The manager can choose to agree with it or not, and if they don't, they can create another what they call insight on that news feed. But ultimately, empowering the employee is the right way in my mind to do it, because it's for the employee, and they're the ones that benefit from it. So when employees come in to see HR and they talk about their manager and they're looking for feedback, I'll ask them this specific question: what have you put into PD? Let's see your feed. Have you been reaching out to your peers? What are you doing to help your peers? So to me, it's more about a viral approach than it is a tops-down management saying, thou shall use PD. And we've seen the rollout be successful. Certainly as we get to the year end and you're looking for that year end summary, it's a little bit different. So you can actually see which managers are doing it and which are not. And employees are coming back and saying, I probably should have been doing that more. It's for my benefit. So I think we are not being super aggressive in the rollout intentionally, and it's actually getting more traction as a result because it's embedding in the culture, again, rather than being kind of some tops-down approach.
One more question.
Hi, so one thing I'm interested in moving from a more structured to a less structured system is how that might introduce additional bias into the performance management process. And so in a world where we have, less than 5% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women and less than 5% are people of color, then how do you mitigate bias in your process? And have you been discussing that as part of this transition?
That's a very good question. We're actually, this is a very active conversation for us, and we haven't solidified on a means yet. But I'm curious to hear what you have to say, actually.
Well, look, I'll say the reason you tend to not see a ton of innovation in kind of HR data analytics space, it's highly regulated, especially when you go global and you've got works councils. So I think we've all struggled with, how do you implement this and still meet compliance standards. So look, I think what we'll see is in comp planning, you'll be able to prove through differentiation of what, you'll be able to prove that there was an adverse impact in the comp planning piece, which is really an output of performance management. But in the actual tool itself, it's a dialogue back and forth. There's no negative employment action or positive employment action. It's development. So I think we're gonna have to piecemeal to figure out what we impact. But I'd really probably defer to you for the most on this one.
I think less on the compliance side, though, more in just in making sure that you're providing equity.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, I look at it like this. It hasn't worked. The statistics you just gave validated that what's been done is not working. So why do we want to hold on to that? Because we have not recognized the diversity. We have not recognized all of our employees. We have not, it's very subjective. And that's why those statistics that you just gave ring so true, because what we have in place that everyone is holding on to so dearly has not worked. And we've got the data to prove that it doesn't work, and thank you for bringing it up and proving it.
But the executives still want to have that conversation.
Yeah.
I think, that one is, we could probably have a panel just on that. I think it goes along with, we're literally just talking about scheduling out an unconscious bias training that couple, because we were talking about interview training, and so everybody's like, we gotta do interview training, and that question actually came up. They said, if you're gonna do interview training, unconscious bias is something that plays into how you're interviewing, what are the questions you're asking, how are you looking at the candidates, how are you, sourcing, it goes all the way back, right? How are you sourcing candidates? And so we're looking at unconscious bias in the very front and seeing it. We just haven't implemented it yet, so check back with me in a couple months.
We're in the same boat, I think, mainly on the recruitment side. And one of the things that we can do easily is taking out, some of the information from the resumes and I mean, we don't have a platform to do it very well yet, so we're still trying to figure that out. But this is literally a question that we had last week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well, this wraps up the panel session tonight. It's been an amazing conversation. I took a lot of notes intending to recap. I feel like I can't even do that justice. So two thank yous. Thank you to our panelists. You guys put a lot of work, obviously, into this, and your insights it was really important. It's an important start of the conversation. So please join me in thanking them, and thank you for your questions.